Hey guys, welcome back here to Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys hanging out with me a little bit and making some time out of your day to spend with me. I always appreciate that. And one of the comments that I get, or questions I get a lot on the videos I do on jig or creature bait fishing, it's like people want to know, how do you know when to use a jig, and how do you know when to use a creature bait or a Texas rig? You know, what's the factors that determine into that? So we're going to have a discussion on that today and sort of go over the situations that I prefer a jig or a creature bait over one or the other, because every one of them is situational and every one of them has a time that they are better than others. So I'm sort of going to give you guys, from my opinion, my experience on how I make that decision. I think it's going to add up to some fish for you guys, because I spent years making mistakes until I finally figured it out. So we're going to get into that today. And also, guys, if you are interested in the best jig on the market by far, check out, guys, my Blaukat Throwback jig made by Cumberland Pro Lures, hand-tied living rubber skirt, guys. Attention to detail second to none on these things. Very labor intensive. Living rubber is the way to go, and they're very hard to find. But I'll put my throwback jig and my tackle warehouse link in the description of this video if you guys would like to order a few. We got 7 colors and 3 different sizes, and you can also get any of the soft plastics. This is a Zoom Z-Craw in my tackle warehouse link in the description of the video too. And also, guys, one real quick thing, anybody interested in booking a private one-on-one on the water lesson with me here on Table Rock Lake in Missouri or Stockton Lake, just shoot me a private message on my Facebook page, Intuitive Angling with Randy Blaukat, for details. So appreciate you guys putting up with the plugs there. Okay, when do you use one of the two? How do you make this decision whether you use a jig or a creature bait, or just a Texas rig in general, a jig versus a Texas rig? Now, first of all, before we get into the nitty gritty specifics on this and sort of like go to it with, through it with a fine tooth comb, a lot of times both of them work at the same time. It's like I've seen situations where you can get bit on both of them. If you're getting a few bites on a jig, you can usually pick up a creature bait and catch some, and vice versa. So they do work hand in hand. You know, there is a situation where they do, most all the time they work hand in hand, but sometimes they definitely prefer one over the other, either for numbers or for size of fish. So that's the determination you have to make. And also that's the determination that depends if you should go with a jig or a creature bait. Are you after numbers of fish, or are you after size of fish? Because the jig is definitely going to produce a larger average size of fish, and the Texas rig is definitely going to get you more bites. Not to say you can't catch a lot of fish on a jig or good ones on a creature bait, but that's, if you have a, let's say for example, you catch 100 bass on a jig and 100 bass on a creature bait, I can promise you those 100 on the jig will weigh more, but it may have taken you a lot longer to catch the 100 bass on the jig versus the creature bait. So that's sort of like the foundation of it. So here's how I determine what I want to use on a jig. First of all, I always want to see if they hit a jig first. This is always my go-to bait. It's like they have to prove to me they are not biting it before I don't throw it, because it just produces good fish. I mean, a jig, it's a bulky bait, it's a larger bait. I mean, this setup here with my full-size throwback jig and the Zoom Super Chunk, I mean, this bait is 4.5 inches long, almost 5 inches long. It's a significantly bulky bait, whereas your Texas rigs are a lot more smaller in profile. So that is one of the reasons for the bites versus the size on there. But I'm always gonna try the jig first. So I tried to isolate this down in terms over the years as terms of like water clarity and cover and water temperature. That doesn't really make any difference, because I have caught a lot of fish on jigs in 4 foot of visibility water, and I've caught a lot of fish on jigs in 4 inches of water visibility. So when you're talking about water clarity is not a factor in determining if you want to use a jig or a creature bait. However, I will say one thing about it. If the water is dirty, like less than a foot deep, less than a foot of visibility, a lot of times jig fishing can be better than if it's a little bit cleaner with that. In other words, if I'm flipping flooded cover, or if I'm flipping docks or lay down trees or something, if I've got 6, 8, 10 inches of visibility, jig fishing is usually decent in a situation like that. And I'm not saying all the time, but a lot of times they tend to hit a jig a little bit better sometimes with that. Not all the time, but sometimes. But here's the determining factor that I want to use with it. It has to do with the specific mood and the personality of the bass at the time. And this is a combination of how stable the water level is, if the water's coming up or coming down. It has to do, again, with the weather patterns, the weather conditions, the wind, fishing pressure, all of that type of stuff. In general, here are some situations that make a jig not as productive as a soft plastic. If you have a lake that gets a lot of fishing pressure, jigs probably are not the best lure that you're going to use unless it's a finesse jig or something. Heavy fished waters are not the best for jigs. Another thing with that is very tough fishing conditions. Let's say you got, no wind, bluebird sky, maybe the water's a little bit cleaner, post-frontal conditions, situations where the bite is really tough. A lot of times jigs aren't going to be your best bait. Though a lot of times the soft plastic or a Texas rig will outproduce, a jig in that situation. Water temperature is not really a factor. I've caught fish on jigs in 38-degree water, and I've caught them on jigs in 95-degree water. So that's not a big deal with that. But that's really about the only thing that can isolate with it. You don't really know until you try it. Now, the soft plastics here, you have a lot more diversity on that. When you're talking about pitching and flipping a Texas rig, there's a ton of different profiles you can use. You can use a big bulky creature bait. You can use a curly-tailed plastic worm. You can use a speed craw. You can use a tube. That's one of the big advantages of pitching and flipping a soft plastic Texas rig is you've got such a diversity of lure profiles, and you got a big diversity of lure colors. Soft plastics come in a lot more colors than jigs do. Basically, your jigs are three primary type colors. You got your dark colors like your black and blue, black chartreuse. You've got your sort of the mid-range colors like peanut butter and jelly and brown and orange. And then you have your little bit cleaner watercolors as green pumpkin. So you've really got less than, probably half a dozen basic jig colors that cover about all the situations. But in soft plastics, you have 100 different combinations. You got 20 different variations of green pumpkin with different type of flakes, 20 different variations of watermelon with different type of flakes. You got June bug, you got red bug, you got 420, it just goes on, the different color variations. So the soft plastics, the advantage it gives you is it gives you a really good opportunity to match specifically like the water clarity to the color that you want to use in correlation with the light intensity. Because one of the things that I've really isolated with soft plastics is when you're talking about specific water clarities like 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot clarity in correlation with a bright sunny sky, a partly cloudy sky, a cloudy sky, an overcast sky. Each one of those scenarios, a different color of Texas rig will work better. Just depends on, that light penetration in the water. So you can really tweak it and really get the most out of it. That's why you get more bites on a soft plastic, in addition to the smaller profile, is the color options with it. So there is not an easy answer with it. The main takeaway from this video, if you can learn anything from it, is they're going to bite both of them at the same time. That's a reality most of the time. Most of the time, you're going to get a lot fewer bites with a jig. You're going to get better bites with a jig versus the soft plastic. So it's just sort of a trade-off, what you want to accomplish. Me as a tournament angler, I'm always trying to get them on a jig. I mean, that's what I want to do. But also there's different times of the year that a jig will work better than a soft plastic. For example, a jig works really good like in the pre-spawn time of the year when the water temperature is in the 50s. When the water temperature is in the 60s, a lot of times I catch more fish on a Texas rig soft plastic. When the water gets in the 70s, it's sort of the same thing, Texas rig soft plastic. When the water gets really warm, like 80, a lot of times I can catch them on a big jig. There's always exceptions to the rule though, but you keep trying to look for something to isolate it down a little bit. And ultimately, you just have to fish both of them to see. If you're in a tournament, if you're a tournament angler and you're wanting to catch quality, you're probably going to spend more time with the jig. If you want just to get bites, the soft plastic. But I guess I'm trying to give you guys a definitive answer, and there's no definitive answer. That's the frustrating thing about bass fishing. It's like when somebody asked me, it's like, Randy, when do I need to use a jig versus a Texas rig? I can't tell you specifically. I can give you some clues on, just like I've done in this video about what the tendencies and what the trends are, but ultimately you just have to see what the fish want day in and day out and then make that determination. And the thing that determines what a bass wants is by their mood and their personality. And that's affected by environmental factors like weather patterns and water levels and water clarities and wind speed and wind direction and fishing pressure. All that stuff factors into it. So it's just another reason why bass fishing is one of the most complicated sports out there, because there's no black and white, cut and dried answer to about anything in fishing. So anyway, guys, I hope it helps out. We'll check in later.